Before we dive into this intense story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. Joseph didn't even turn his head as the glass door of Stratton Financial hissed shut behind him, sealing off the blistering Raleigh afternoon. Inside, the air was flawless, cool and filtered, designed for a clientele far removed from sweat and struggle. Light classical music drifted softly above the marble floors, as if money had a soundtrack. He paused at the entrance, his tall frame clothed in a navy blazer and worn leather shoes. His outfit was clean, professional, nothing flashy, but clearly intentional. To some, it might suggest a humble financial advisor or a small business owner, but few, if any, would have guessed the truth, that they were looking at the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar development firm. Joseph moved with purpose toward the teller stations, pausing before a sleek glass window. Behind it sat a young white woman with long curls cascading down her shoulder, her name tag announcing her identity in engraved gold, Emily. She was deeply absorbed in her screen, her fingers tapping briskly on the keyboard. Joseph stood there, silent but visible, waiting. Seconds passed. Then more. Nothing. A white man in a custom-fitted suit strode in. Emily's head snapped up, her face brightening instantly. "Mr. Dalton," she chirped, rising from her seat. Her tone was warm, enthusiastic, almost flirty. Joseph remained still. When she finally turned her attention back to her screen, Joseph spoke. His voice was smooth, respectful. "Excuse me. I'd like to make a deposit." Her gaze lifted, cold and uninterested. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I don't need one. I'm depositing a certified check into an active account." Emily sighed loudly, clearly irritated by the disruption of her routine. She gestured vaguely toward the teller lane. "Go down there." Joseph nodded, calm as ever. At the next counter, he gently placed his identification and the envelope containing the certified check on the marble surface. Emily had followed, unfortunately. She picked up the ID between her thumb and index finger like it was contaminated. Her brow furrowed. Then, in a move that stopped all motion in the grand lobby, she dropped the ID to the floor with a loud clatter. It echoed. Every sound in the room ceased, no typing, no footsteps, no conversation. Joseph stood still. The insult was deliberate. He felt it sink into his bones. And then, with the grace and calm that had served him in far more brutal boardrooms, he bent down, picked up his ID, and stood tall again. His eyes locked on Emily's. "I want you to remember what you did today," he said, his voice soft but unyielding. "Because a time will come when you'll have to face it. And when you do, I won't be the one ashamed." He turned and walked away, the cold silence behind him broken only by whispers. As the doors opened and the harsh sunlight bathed his face, he felt the sting of what had just happened. But it wasn't defeat. It was ignition. A reckoning had just begun. Joseph didn't go straight home. Instead, he returned to his office, Edwards Construction Group, a sleek headquarters perched on the 42nd floor, overlooking downtown Raleigh like a silent watchtower. The city glowed below, drenched in twilight, but Joseph saw none of it. He sat alone in his corner office, surrounded by silence and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the quiet storm inside him. On his desk was a single folder, thick, crisp, and formal. The logo on its cover, Stratton Financial. He opened it slowly. Inside was the documentation for a $2.3 billion infrastructure partnership, signed, sealed, and hours away from being announced to the press. Joseph R. Edwards, Chief Executive Officer. His signature glared back at him from the final page, black ink on ivory stock. Irrefutable proof of his position, his power, his value. And yet, in the eyes of a single bank employee, none of it mattered. Because of the color of his skin. Because he wasn't wearing a Rolex. Because he didn't walk in like he owned the place, even though, in many ways, he did. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. Instead, he worked. Joseph spent the entire evening reviewing the agreement with a meticulous eye. Page by page, he assembled a dossier, one that outlined not only the terms of the contract but the full weight of Edwards Construction's involvement, their investment, their influence, their importance. He attached internal memos from Stratton's board, naming him as a key strategic partner. Emails. Endorsements. Signatures. By the time dawn broke across the Raleigh skyline, the dossier was airtight. This wasn't just evidence. It was leverage. Joseph rose from his desk and walked to the wardrobe in his office. He didn't dress like yesterday. Today, he selected a custom-cut charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and the same shoes he wore to negotiate his first $1 million deal. This wasn't attire for business. This was war paint. An hour later, he walked back into Stratton Financial. No hesitation. No humility. The air conditioning was just as icy. The music just as smug. But Joseph's steps cut through the space with a different rhythm, a rhythm of command. Behind the front desk, the receptionist, Madison, lifted her gaze with mild irritation, then squinted at him. She opened her mouth to speak, but he spoke first. "I need to speak with Mr. Michael Kent. Now." "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly, her tone rehearsed. "Mr. Kent is in a meeting. He'll want to see me." Joseph placed a single business card on the marble desk. He didn't drop it. He set it. The way one might place a final chess piece on a winning move. Madison glanced down, and the blood drained from her face. Joseph R. Edwards. Chief Executive Officer. Edwards Construction Group. Her composure collapsed in a single heartbeat. Without another word, she shot from her chair and disappeared into the back offices. Seconds later, the door flew open. Michael Kent, the branch manager, stepped out in a rush, face pale, eyes wide. "Mr. Edwards," he stammered, extending his hand. I had no idea." Joseph didn't shake his hand. He didn't smile. He simply said, "Let's talk. Privately." Inside Kent's corner office, Joseph placed the thick dossier on the desk. The sound was sharp. Final. Kent opened it, flipping page after page, and with each line of text, each signed agreement, his expression crumbled. I don't know how this happened," Kent said, voice trembling. "I swear, had I known." Joseph raised a hand. "This isn't about what you knew. It's about what your bank represents." Kent looked stunned. "Your teller threw my ID on the floor. Not because of any policy. Because she didn't think I belonged." The silence was suffocating. Kent looked cornered, small. "This contract is worth $2.3 billion. It positions your bank as the exclusive financier for a project that will define this city's skyline for the next 30 years. Joseph leaned in, his voice dropping to a razor-thin edge. "Tell me, Mr. Kent, does your bank really want to lose that?" Kent was speechless. The weight of the threat, not spoken, but fully implied, settled like a stone in the room. Joseph stood. "You have until the end of the day to prove to me this bank deserves to remain in this partnership." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out, leaving the stunned manager in the silence of his unraveling authority. But Joseph wasn't done yet. Kent was just middle management. The real accountability? That required someone at the top. By the time Joseph stepped into his private town car, the weight of the conversation with Michael Kent had already begun to fade into strategy. He wasn't interested in hollow apologies. He wasn't chasing a moment of remorse. He was chasing something much bigger. Accountability. The only way to fix the rot was to carve it out from the top. He dialed his assistant. "Sarah," he said, his voice low but deliberate, "I need you to arrange a meeting with Matthew Andrews. Make it clear it's urgent. Tell him it concerns the $2.3 billion contract." "Understood," she replied instantly. "Anything else?" Joseph paused. Make sure he knows I won't be speaking to anyone else but him. 37 minutes later, his phone buzzed. The meeting was confirmed. Stratton Financial's regional vice president had cleared his afternoon. The message was clear: power recognizes power. As his car sped toward the bank's towering downtown headquarters, a sleek skyscraper of mirrored glass and cold precision, Joseph stared out the window, not at the cityscape, but through it. He wasn't angry. That emotion had long burned off. What remained was a calm, unshakable certainty: today, the system would be made to see him. Stratton's executive floor was a world apart from the lobby. Plush carpet. Art that whispered exclusivity. Security that nodded silently at those who belonged. When Joseph arrived, he was met by a polished assistant who offered him coffee, water, even tea. The tone had shifted. The respect was palpable. Moments later, Matthew Andrews entered the conference room, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, designer cufflinks, and the carefully neutral expression of someone trained in corporate diplomacy. Mr. Edwards, he greeted, extending his hand with cautious formality. I understand there's an urgent matter. Joseph shook his hand firmly, then opened his briefcase. Without a word, he placed the contract and documentation on the gleaming table. Each page aligned perfectly. No drama. Just proof. Andrews glanced down, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. Then he stopped. Right there, in black and white, under the heading Strategic Regional Partnership, Phase 2 Expansion, was his own signature. And directly beneath it, Joseph R. Edwards, Chief Executive Officer, Edwards Construction Group. Andrews sat back slowly, color draining from his face. I don't understand, he said, barely above a whisper. This. You. Joseph didn't blink. Yes. Me. Andrews looked up, dazed. You were the gentleman involved in yesterday's incident? Joseph's response was calm and sharp. No, Mr. Andrews. I wasn't involved in an incident. I was the incident. The room went still. I walked into your bank, quietly and professionally, Joseph continued. Your employee dismissed me. She threw my ID on the ground. And your manager watched it happen. Andrews's throat moved as he swallowed hard. This isn't just about customer service, Joseph said. This is about institutional rot. Your people didn't see me because I didn't fit their idea of success. And that failure? It reflects on you. Andrews was silent, the shame sinking in fast and hard. He tried to find words but there were none to offer. Not in the face of what had been exposed. Then Joseph said something that shifted the entire tone of the conversation. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for clarity. Andrews blinked, unsure. This contract, this partnership, is worth billions. But I won't be part of a system that tolerates discrimination. So I'm giving you one chance, right now, to show me what Stratton Financial really stands for. Andrews exhaled shakily, then nodded. You'll have it. Immediate internal review. Executive oversight. And I'll personally oversee the changes. I'll expect a full report, Joseph said, standing. And you'll deliver it to me, in person. He walked to the door, paused, then turned back. One more thing, he added, voice firm. I don't need your bank. But you, Mr. Andrews, you need mine. With that, he left. Andrews sat frozen in his chair for a long moment before reaching for the phone. Get me compliance, he said, voice tight. Now. The fallout would be swift. And brutal. Because Joseph Edwards had just turned quiet humiliation into a corporate reckoning. The impact was immediate. Within the hour, an emergency internal audit was ordered at Stratton Financial. Compliance officers launched a full investigation, combing through security footage, transaction logs, and interdepartmental communications. No one, no matter their rank, was immune from scrutiny. The footage from the previous day left nothing to interpretation. There was Joseph, calm and composed, handing over his identification. There was Emily, scrutinizing it with a scowl, holding it like it was contagious. And then came the moment that sealed her fate, her arm flinching as she let the ID fall with a deliberate flick of her fingers. The plastic hit the floor, echoed by a silence that wrapped the lobby in shame. The recording played again. And again. Every executive in the review room watched with growing discomfort. No one spoke as the head of HR typed out the dismissal notice in real time. Emily was called into a conference room that afternoon. She was pale, confused, still assuming she'd be given a warning at most. But as soon as she entered, she saw the senior leadership seated around the table. A box with her belongings sat on the floor. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The termination letter was slid across the table. There was nothing she could argue, everything was captured on video. Her condescension. Her contempt. Her catastrophic mistake. For Michael Kent, the fallout was slower but no less damning. Surveillance showed him watching the incident unfold. Doing nothing. Saying nothing. Then looking away as Joseph left, his composure holding what should have shattered the room. Negligence. Complicity. His removal from branch leadership was swift. Officially, it was a reassignment. Unofficially, it was a stripping of power. His new role? An assistant administrator for a mid-tier office in Durham. No corner office. No team. No respect. But not everyone fled from accountability. Madison, the receptionist, submitted her resignation that same day. Though she hadn't thrown the ID, she'd played her part in dismissing Joseph. The way she'd stiffened when he asked for the manager. The way she tried to block him from access. She knew she had to face the truth. She walked out of Stratton Financial with a heavy heart but a small flicker of hope that, somehow, facing her failure head-on was the first step toward growth. Later that evening, the bank's leadership gathered in a conference hall. For once, the room was not filled with smiles and handshakes. It was filled with quiet reckoning. Matthew Andrews stepped to the front, holding no script. He didn't need one. "We failed," he said plainly. Not just one teller. Not just one manager. All of us. The culture that allowed a man like Joseph Edwards to be treated that way didn't start at the front desk. It started with what we allowed to remain unchallenged. He paused, scanning the room. Some of you may think this is just about damage control. It's not. It's about soul searching. If you've ever doubted a client based on appearance, status, or color, if you've ever hesitated to respect someone, then you are part of the problem. The words landed hard. People shifted in their seats, many unable to meet his eyes. "I expect each of you," he continued, "to look inward. Change starts there. Otherwise, we risk not only our reputation, but our relevance." The room was silent when he finished. Deeply silent. No polite applause. Just the weight of truth sinking into every corner. But Joseph wasn't watching any of it. He was in his office, again, late at night. This time not reviewing contracts, but building something new. Empower the Future. That was the name he gave it. A leadership and financial training initiative for young entrepreneurs of color in Raleigh. Not just to teach them business, but to teach them how to stand tall in rooms where people might try to make them small. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about legacy. Joseph wasn't interested in punishing the system. He was interested in replacing it, with something better. And he was just getting started. The first class of Empower the Future began inside a modest community center downtown, far from the gleaming high-rises of Stratton Financial or Edwards Construction Group. Folding chairs. Whiteboards. No flashy tech. Just raw knowledge, respect, and truth. Joseph stood before a room of 25 young adults, most of them black and brown, most of them unsure if they belonged in business at all. They looked at him with wide eyes. Not because of his wealth, but because, despite everything he had accomplished, he stood in front of them now, sleeves rolled up, no notes, no distance between them. He told them what had happened at the bank. Not for pity. For clarity. This world, he said, won't always open the door. Sometimes it barely cracks it. But your job is to walk in like it's already yours. He taught them how to read balance sheets. How to present themselves in high-stakes meetings. How to answer when someone says, "You don't look like a CEO." He told them how to respond, without rage, but with power. Because, he said, what they see when they look at you is their limitation, not yours. Word spread. By the end of the second month, there was a waiting list of over 100 names. One afternoon, after class had ended and most had gone, a young woman lingered near the door. She was around 20, dressed in a thrifted suit, hair tied back nervously. "Mr. Edwards?" she asked, almost a whisper. He looked up from his notes. "Yes. I just wanted to say. I applied for a small business loan today. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for being there." Joseph felt a deep pause in his chest. She smiled nervously, tears in her eyes. "This program, what you're doing, it's more than just teaching us. You're showing us we deserve to be in the room." Joseph nodded slowly. "That's the goal." He watched her walk out the door, back into a world that still wouldn't fully understand her, but one she was now prepared to meet, step for step. And it was in moments like that when Joseph knew the humiliating experience at Stratton hadn't broken him. It had revealed his purpose. But the story wasn't done. 1 week later, a sealed envelope arrived at his office. The return address? Stratton Financial Headquarters. He opened it carefully, expecting more damage control or another apology. But it wasn't that. It was an invitation. A formal request for Joseph Edwards to serve as the keynote speaker at Raleigh's annual Business Leadership Conference, co-sponsored by Stratton Financial. He stared at the signature at the bottom, Matthew Andrews. There was no arrogance in it. No pleading either. Just one sentence, handwritten beneath the typed message. "We need your voice more than ever." Joseph set the letter down slowly, staring out the window. This wasn't about ego. It was about opportunity. And this time, he would take the stage, not for himself, but for every person who had ever been dismissed, disrespected, or told they didn't belong. The Raleigh Center Hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers and hushed anticipation. The annual Business Leadership Conference was the city's crown jewel, a gathering of C-suite executives, venture capitalists, mayors, and policymakers. But this year, the buzz wasn't about the venue or the guest list. It was about the keynote speaker. When Joseph Edwards' name appeared on the official program, it sent a ripple through the business community. Some were surprised. Some were skeptical. And a few, like Emily and Michael Kent, now guests, not insiders, were simply anxious. Joseph stood backstage, alone in the green room, adjusting the cuffs of his jacket. He wasn't nervous. Not anymore. That emotion had long since been replaced by something deeper, clarity. Out front, Matthew Andrews took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "tonight's speaker is a man I once failed to recognize, not because he lacked merit, but because I failed to look beyond my own assumptions." The crowd quieted. He's not just a CEO. He's a builder, of cities, of futures, of people. And tonight, he's here to share a message we all need to hear. Applause swelled as Joseph stepped onto the stage. Spotlights caught the calm in his eyes. He approached the mic and let the applause fade completely before speaking. "I was asked to tell my story," he said, his voice clear and grounded. "But I won't." A pause. Eyes widened. Phones rose, recording. Because my story is not unique. That's the point. Every day, people walk into rooms where they're measured not by what they've built, but by how they look. And every day, we get a choice, to play along with those old rules or rewrite them. He scanned the room. I was once told, indirectly, that I didn't belong in a bank I was about to pour $2.3 billion into. That moment could have broken me. But it didn't. He looked directly at Andrews. Because power isn't just about money. It's about conviction. It's about how you respond when someone tells you you're less. His tone shifted, warmer now. I see young leaders every week who have the brilliance, the drive, the ideas, but who've been made to feel like guests in rooms they were born to lead. The ballroom was silent. So I won't give you my story, he continued. Instead, I'll leave you with a question. One that could change everything. He paused again, measured, intentional. What if we trusted people, from the first moment we saw them? What would the world look like then? The hush deepened. Michael Kent, seated in the third row, stared at the floor, his hands clenched. The question burned into him, because he knew he hadn't. Not when it counted. Emily sat near the back, her eyes wet, the sting of memory still raw. Joseph let the silence linger. Then came a single clap. Then two. Then the room erupted into a standing ovation, the sound echoing through the chandeliers and corridors like thunder. But Joseph didn't smile in triumph. He just nodded once and stepped down. Not as a victim. Not even as a victor. But as a messenger whose words had finally reached where they needed to go. After the applause faded, after the photos were taken and the conversations resumed, Joseph quietly slipped out of the grand ballroom and into the warm night air of downtown Raleigh. The city pulsed with lights and possibility, but unlike before, he no longer felt alone against it. He walked slowly, jacket over his shoulder, passing a row of quiet restaurants and late-night cafes. His phone buzzed non-stop, texts from former colleagues, investors, strangers who'd watched the speech live-streamed online. But Joseph ignored them for now. He didn't need validation. He had something far more valuable. Purpose. In the weeks that followed, Empower the Future exploded in popularity. Community leaders reached out to sponsor students. Local banks, even some who had once turned people away, asked how they could help. Joseph didn't turn them down. He set terms. Real ones. Equity training. Internship opportunities. Zero tolerance for discrimination. Meanwhile, back at Stratton Financial, sweeping changes continued. Emily, now volunteering full-time at the Equal Access Foundation, began to rebuild her understanding of what dignity and service really meant. One morning, she helped an elderly black woman through a confusing loan application process, her hands gentle, her voice kind. For the first time, she saw not just numbers or policies, but people. Her old habits didn't vanish overnight. But something better took root, humility. Michael Kent, demoted and forgotten by most of his former peers, surprised everyone by quietly choosing not to resign. Instead, he started mentoring small business clients, many of them Black or Latino, helping them navigate a system he once never questioned. Each session was a reminder of how much he hadn't known, and how much he still had to learn. One afternoon, he stayed late to help a 19-year-old secure a startup grant. As he handed her the approved papers, she said, "Thanks. Nobody ever believed in me that fast before." The words hit him harder than she knew. Redemption didn't come through grand gestures. It came through persistence. And Joseph? He remained exactly where he had always been, building. Quietly. Intentionally. Creating spaces where people weren't judged by their shoes or their suits, but by their potential. He turned down several major interviews, telling one reporter, "This story was never about me. It was about how we changed the world, one room at a time." Eventually, Stratton Financial invited him back, not for business, but to help redesign their leadership development program. Joseph accepted, but only on the condition that the initiative be co-led by young people from Empower the Future. When the bank agreed, he knew the message had finally landed. This was no longer just about what happened to him at that teller window. This was about what could happen next, for thousands of others. And on a warm Friday afternoon, just before closing, Joseph stood in the same bank lobby where it had all begun. Only this time, a young black woman, one of his former students, stood behind the counter. Her blazer crisp, her posture confident, her smile genuine. "Mr. Edwards," she said warmly, recognizing him at once. "We've got your documents ready." He thanked her, and as he walked toward the exit, he glanced once over his shoulder. The sunlight poured in through the glass doors. But now, it didn't feel harsh. It felt earned. Welcome to True Echo, where real stories meet powerful lessons. In today's gripping episode, a quiet man in a plain navy blazer walks into a prestigious bank, only to be insulted and humiliated in front of everyone. But they had no idea who he really was. What happens next will not only shake a billion-dollar institution, it will change the future for countless others. Stay with us. Joseph's story reminds us that the most dangerous form of prejudice is the kind that hides in professionalism, where courtesy ends when assumptions begin. But through quiet dignity, strength, and action, he turned a moment of humiliation into a movement for change. Remember this: character is not proven in how you treat the powerful, but in how you treat those you underestimate. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment about a time someone judged you too quickly, and what they learned. Subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and transformation. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode.